A quiet truth hides beneath everyday life, and once you recognize it, the way you see the world will never be the same again. The most powerful forms of control do not announce themselves with threats, violence, or obvious force. They arrive softly. They slip into your routines, your habits, and your beliefs until they become so familiar that questioning them feels unnecessary. What makes this reality so unsettling is that intelligent, educated, and independent people fall into its influence every single day without realizing it. Some of the biggest decisions in your life may not be as original as you think. The opinions you passionately defend, the products you feel drawn toward, the fears that keep you awake at night, and even the goals that push you out of bed each morning may have been shaped by forces you rarely notice. Not because you lack intelligence, not because you are weak, but because you are human. Human beings are wired in ways that once helped them survive, but can now be used to influence how they think, feel, and behave. In this video, we are going to uncover the hidden reality behind psychological control and reveal the subtle mechanisms that shape human behavior. You will discover why the fear of being different can quietly push people to abandon their own judgment. You will learn how emotions like fear, anger, excitement, and urgency can override logic and make even careful thinkers vulnerable to manipulation. We will explore how repetition changes perception, why familiarity creates trust even when trust has not been earned, and how the constant battle for your attention can slowly redefine what you believe to be true. Along the way, you will encounter lesser-known psychological insights that expose just how easily the human mind can be guided without awareness. Yet this video is not meant to make you fearful of the world around you. Its purpose is far more powerful than that. Awareness gives you a choice. It allows you to pause before reacting, question before accepting, and think before following. The people who are hardest to control are not those who reject everything. They are the ones who understand how influence works and choose carefully which voices deserve a place in their minds. So stay with me until the very end, because the final lesson may be the most important one of all. It is not just about recognizing when influence is happening. It is about reclaiming the ability to think for yourself in a world where countless people and systems compete for your attention, your emotions, and your obedience. Once these hidden patterns become visible, you will begin to notice them everywhere, and that awareness can change the way you make decisions for the rest of your life. Welcome to our channel, where we explore the psychology behind human behavior and uncover the truths most people overlook. If you enjoy thought-provoking content that challenges the way you see the world, make sure to subscribe and join us for the journey ahead, because the knowledge you gain today might protect your freedom tomorrow. Most people picture control in dramatic ways. They think about dictators standing behind podiums, prison cells with locked doors, soldiers enforcing orders, and powerful figures issuing commands that cannot be refused. History books are filled with those images, and because of that, many people believe they would immediately recognize when someone is trying to control them. They trust themselves enough to say, "If anyone tried to manipulate me, I would know." But that confidence is exactly what makes invisible influence so effective. Real control rarely announces itself. It doesn't walk through the front door demanding obedience. It slips quietly through the side entrance of the mind. It arrives as a harmless suggestion, a repeated message, a familiar idea, or a social expectation that slowly becomes accepted without resistance. Human beings naturally push back against obvious pressure. The moment someone aggressively tells you what to think, what to buy, or how to behave, your defenses rise. You question their motives. You become cautious. But when the same idea is introduced gently and repeatedly until it feels like it came from within you, the experience is completely different. You don't resist it. You embrace it. You protect it. You defend it because it now feels connected to your identity. This hidden process shapes more of human behavior than most people realize. Think about how many preferences people believe they discovered on their own. The music they enjoy, the clothing they wear, the lifestyle they admire, the opinions they repeat. Many of these choices feel deeply personal, yet they often develop through repeated exposure and social reinforcement. The human brain is designed to conserve energy. It cannot carefully analyze every piece of information it encounters each day. There are simply too many decisions to make. To function efficiently, the brain relies on shortcuts. Familiarity becomes one of those shortcuts. The more often an idea appears, the less threatening it feels. The less threatening it feels, the more acceptable it becomes. Over time, acceptance can turn into belief. Belief can turn into action, and action can become habit. By the time people notice the change, they may have forgotten where the original idea came from in the first place. This is why some of the most influential people in society are not necessarily the loudest voices. Influence often belongs to those who shape what appears ordinary. They define what success should look like, what beauty should look like, what happiness should look like, and what failure should be feared. Once enough people adopt these standards, questioning them starts to feel uncomfortable. The strange becomes normal. The unusual becomes expected. Eventually, people stop asking why things are done a certain way, because they have always seen them done that way. The absence of questioning creates fertile ground for influence to grow stronger. The mind becomes less curious and more automatic. Familiar patterns guide decisions without conscious awareness. This quiet form of control becomes even more powerful because of another ancient force built deep into human nature, the need to belong. Thousands of years ago, isolation carried serious consequences. Human beings survived through cooperation. Being rejected by the tribe could mean losing protection, resources, and support. Those who remained connected had a greater chance of survival. Those instincts did not disappear simply because society evolved. Modern life may look different, but the emotional fear of exclusion remains remarkably strong. The desire to fit in influences behavior in ways people rarely acknowledge. Individuals often change themselves to avoid standing apart from the group. They soften opinions they truly believe. They remain silent during conversations they disagree with. They pretend enthusiasm for trends they do not understand. They adjust their personalities depending on who surrounds them, because acceptance feels safe and rejection feels threatening. This fear of being different can quietly override honesty. People laugh at jokes they do not find amusing because everyone else is laughing. They applaud ideas they privately question because no one else objects. They adopt attitudes they never examined, simply because those attitudes dominate their environment. The pressure may not come through direct threats. Nobody explicitly says, "Agree with us or suffer." The message is often unspoken. It exists in facial expressions, awkward silences, social rewards, and subtle signals of approval or disapproval. The human mind notices these signals constantly. Over time, they shape behavior. One of the most revealing demonstrations of this tendency came from psychologist Solomon Asch. Participants entered what they believed was a simple experiment involving visual judgment. The task itself was easy. They were shown lines of different lengths and asked to identify which lines matched. The correct answer was obvious. Under normal circumstances, mistakes were rare. However, there was a hidden twist. Everyone else in the room had been instructed beforehand to intentionally choose the wrong answer. One after another, people confidently gave responses that were clearly incorrect. Faced with unanimous disagreement, many participants abandoned what their own eyes showed them and agreed with the group. They were not confused. They were not unintelligent. They experienced the uncomfortable tension between trusting themselves and remaining connected to others. For many, belonging won that battle. The most unsettling aspect of this phenomenon is that people rarely recognize it in themselves. It is easy to watch such experiments and assume, "I would never do that." Yet conformity often appears in ordinary situations. It influences workplace decisions, friendships, online discussions, cultural expectations, and personal values. The need to avoid conflict can become stronger than the desire to pursue truth. People begin borrowing opinions from those around them without realizing it. They mistake familiarity for certainty. They confuse consensus with correctness. The crowd becomes a substitute for independent judgment. At some point, an uncomfortable question emerges. Which beliefs genuinely belong to you? Which values were carefully chosen through reflection? And which ones were absorbed through repetition and social pressure? The answer is not always simple. Every person is shaped by family, culture, education, and community. Influence itself is not inherently harmful. Human beings learn through one another. The danger appears when influence goes unnoticed. When ideas bypass examination and settle into the mind unquestioned, people can slowly drift away from their own reasoning while believing they are exercising complete independence. As powerful as social influence can be, another force quietly shapes human decisions every day. Emotions. Most people like to believe they are logical creatures who analyze information carefully before making choices. Reality tells a different story. Emotions often arrive first. Logic frequently follows afterward to justify what feelings have already decided. Fear can transform possibilities into threats. Anger can reduce complex situations into simple battles between right and wrong. Excitement can magnify rewards while minimizing risks. Urgency can convince people that immediate action is more important than thoughtful consideration. Fear, in particular, narrows attention. When fear takes over, the brain shifts into survival mode. Its priority becomes protection, not reflection. Questions disappear. Nuance fades away. Immediate action feels necessary. Under those conditions, people become more vulnerable to persuasion because speed replaces analysis. Messages framed around danger gain more power. Decisions become reactive rather than deliberate. Anger produces a similar effect. It creates certainty. It fuels confidence. It pushes people toward quick judgments and immediate responses. Complex realities are reduced to simple conclusions because outrage does not encourage patience. It encourages action. Excitement can be equally deceptive. Positive emotions lower defenses. Opportunities appear brighter. Risks seem smaller. The possibility of reward captures attention so completely that caution fades into the background. Urgency amplifies all of these emotional states. Limited time offers. Warnings of missed opportunities. Pressure to decide quickly. The underlying message remains the same. Act now. Think later. The less time people have to pause, the less opportunity they have to evaluate information critically. This is why panic spreads rapidly through communities. It explains why outrage becomes contagious, and why emotional headlines attract more attention than balanced discussions. Human beings naturally absorb the emotional states of those around them. Anxiety can move through groups with astonishing speed. So can anger. So can enthusiasm. The emotional tone of an environment influences perception without requiring conscious permission. People begin reacting not only to events themselves, but also to the reactions of others. The individuals who resist these pressures are not emotionless. They still experience fear. They still feel anger. They still become excited and uncertain. The difference lies in what happens next. They create a small space between emotion and action. They do not allow the first impulse to make the final decision. They pause long enough to ask questions. Why am I reacting this way? What information might I be missing? Is this urgency real, or is it being created for me? Could there be another perspective I have not considered? Within that brief pause exists the possibility of independent thought, and that possibility becomes increasingly valuable in a world filled with influences competing for attention, agreement, and immediate response. There is another reality that many people underestimate, even though it quietly shapes almost every part of their lives. It is not money. It is not status. It is not physical strength. It is attention. Your attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess, because whatever repeatedly captures, it slowly begins to shape the way you see the world. People often assume they think about whatever matters most to them, but in many cases, they think about whatever receives the most space inside their minds. Attention determines focus. Focus influences perception. Perception guides decisions, and decisions eventually shape an entire life. This is why the battle for your attention has become one of the defining struggles of the modern world. Every day, countless voices compete to enter your mind. Advertisements want your attention. News headlines want your attention. Social media platforms want your attention. Influencers want your attention. Political movements want your attention. Companies want your attention. Even people in your personal life compete for pieces of your mental energy. Everyone understands one simple truth. If they can consistently direct your attention, they can influence what you think about, what you fear, what you desire, and how you interpret reality itself. The human brain was never designed to process endless streams of information without pause. Yet many people begin their mornings by reaching for a screen before they have fully opened their eyes. Within minutes, they are flooded with notifications, opinions, breaking news, entertainment clips, advertisements, arguments, and updates from people they barely know. Before they have had the opportunity to decide what deserves their focus, countless other people have already made that decision for them. Attention moves from one thing to another at incredible speed. One moment there is outrage. The next moment there is humor, then anxiety, then comparison, then excitement, then fear again. The mind becomes trapped in a cycle of constant stimulation. It reacts endlessly but rarely reflects deeply. Constant distraction weakens critical thinking because critical thinking requires time. It requires concentration. It demands patience. It asks difficult questions. It tolerates uncertainty while evidence is examined. Distraction destroys that process. It encourages shallow engagement rather than careful understanding. People skim headlines without reading articles. They repeat opinions without investigating their origins. They react emotionally before gathering information. Their minds become accustomed to speed, and anything requiring sustained attention begins to feel uncomfortable. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Reflection becomes boring. Complexity becomes frustrating. Quick answers become more appealing than accurate ones. This environment creates fertile ground for influence. When people stop examining information carefully, repeated messages become increasingly powerful. The brain naturally uses repetition as a shortcut. Familiar ideas feel safer than unfamiliar ones. Statements heard once may be ignored. Statements heard 100 times begin to sound true simply because they no longer feel new. This does not mean people are foolish. It means they are human. Familiarity reduces resistance. It lowers psychological defenses. Over time, repetition transforms assumptions into beliefs and beliefs into certainty. Think about how often people encounter the same messages throughout their lives. Success means having more. Happiness looks a certain way. Beauty follows a particular standard. Certain groups should be admired while others should be feared. Certain lifestyles deserve respect while others deserve ridicule. These ideas are reinforced through entertainment, conversations, advertisements, and cultural expectations. Eventually, many people stop recognizing them as messages. They start viewing them as facts about reality. Yet reality itself has not changed. The lens through which they interpret reality has changed. If someone spends hours every day consuming fearful content, the world begins to appear overwhelmingly dangerous. Threats seem present everywhere. Trust becomes difficult. Anxiety increases because the mind believes danger is constant. If another person repeatedly consumes outrage and conflict, they may begin seeing enemies everywhere they look. Disagreement becomes hostility. Nuance disappears. Compassion weakens. The world becomes divided into heroes and villains. If someone is constantly exposed to images of wealth, perfection, and comparison, dissatisfaction grows. Their achievements feel smaller. Their appearance feels inadequate. Their lives begin to seem incomplete, even when nothing about their actual circumstances has changed. What people repeatedly consume becomes their version of reality, because attention strengthens whatever it touches most often. This is why awareness of inputs matters. Many people pay close attention to what they eat because they understand that food affects physical health. Far fewer people pay attention to what they mentally consume each day. Yet information shapes emotional health, perception, and behavior just as powerfully. Every headline, every conversation, every piece of entertainment, every repeated message enters the mind and leaves an impression. Some impressions fade quickly. Others settle deeply beneath awareness. The question is not whether outside influences affect you. They do. The real question is whether you are consciously choosing those influences or passively absorbing whatever happens to appear before you. Protecting your attention does not mean disconnecting from the world. It does not require rejecting technology or avoiding difficult conversations. It means becoming intentional. It means recognizing that your mind deserves protection because whatever repeatedly enters it eventually shapes your inner world. Attention is not an unlimited resource. Every moment spent focused on one thing is a moment unavailable for something else. The more people understand this truth, the more carefully they begin choosing where their awareness goes. But recognizing the battle for attention leads to another question. If the world constantly pushes and pulls at the human mind, how does someone maintain freedom within that environment? How does a person avoid becoming a product of endless influences? The answer begins with psychological independence. Freedom is often misunderstood. Many people think independence means rejecting authority, resisting every popular opinion, or refusing advice from others. They assume that questioning influence requires becoming rebellious and oppositional. But true psychological independence looks very different. It begins with awareness. It starts with noticing rather than automatically reacting. It means understanding that every human being is influenced while refusing to surrender the responsibility of conscious choice. One of the simplest and most powerful habits of independent thinkers is their ability to pause. Most reactions happen quickly. Someone says something offensive. Anger appears immediately. A frightening headline appears. Fear takes over instantly. A persuasive argument is delivered with confidence. Agreement follows without reflection. The space between stimulus and response becomes incredibly small. Yet within that small space lies the possibility of freedom. A pause interrupts automatic patterns. It allows the mind to catch up with emotion. It creates room for evaluation. Instead of asking, "How should I react?" independent thinkers ask, "Why am I reacting this way?" Questioning automatic beliefs is another essential practice. Every person inherits assumptions from family, culture, education, and social experiences. Some beliefs prove valuable. Others deserve reconsideration. Independent thinking requires the courage to examine both. Why do I believe this? Where did this belief come from? Have I ever challenged it? Would I still hold this opinion if everyone around me disagreed? These questions are uncomfortable because they force people to confront uncertainty. Yet uncertainty is not weakness. It is often the beginning of understanding. Many people avoid this process because they fear standing alone. Social approval feels rewarding. Agreement provides comfort. Being accepted by others satisfies a deep human need. But there are moments when independent thought demands temporary discomfort. It requires tolerating misunderstanding. It means accepting that not everyone will approve of your conclusions. This does not mean becoming argumentative or seeking conflict for its own sake. It means refusing to betray your own reasoning simply to gain acceptance. Some of the most important decisions in life involve choosing integrity over popularity. Becoming comfortable standing alone also means becoming comfortable admitting ignorance. Modern culture often rewards certainty. People feel pressure to have immediate answers about everything. They fear saying, "I don't know." Yet those three words protect the mind from arrogance. They create space for curiosity. They encourage learning. Independent thinkers understand that changing your mind in response to better evidence is not a failure of character. It is evidence of intellectual honesty. Seeking different perspectives further strengthens psychological independence. It is easy to surround yourself with people who confirm everything you already believe. Agreement feels reassuring. Familiar viewpoints create comfort. But growth rarely happens within echo chambers. Exposure to different experiences, ideas, and interpretations challenges assumptions. It reveals blind spots. It forces deeper reflection. Listening to opposing perspectives does not require surrendering your values. It requires humility, the willingness to acknowledge that no individual sees reality perfectly. This habit becomes increasingly rare in environments driven by outrage and certainty. People often divide themselves into groups and defend those groups without question. Agreement becomes loyalty. Doubt becomes betrayal. Nuance disappears beneath identity. Independent thinkers resist this tendency. They recognize that truth is not determined by popularity, volume, or affiliation. They remain willing to evaluate ideas based on merit rather than origin. An argument is not automatically true because it comes from someone familiar. It is not automatically false because it comes from someone different. Thinking before agreeing or rejecting may sound simple, but it requires discipline. The mind naturally seeks shortcuts. Immediate judgments conserve energy. Reflection demands effort. Yet freedom depends upon that effort. Before embracing an idea, independent thinkers ask whether it deserves acceptance. Before dismissing an idea, they ask whether it deserves consideration. They resist emotional extremes long enough to investigate. They refuse to outsource their thinking completely to authority figures, social groups, algorithms, or cultural trends. The practice of psychological independence is not dramatic. It does not announce itself loudly. It appears in small moments repeated consistently over time. Choosing to pause before responding. Choosing to question familiar assumptions. Choosing curiosity over certainty. Choosing honesty over approval. Choosing reflection over impulse. Choosing awareness over automatic behavior. These decisions gradually strengthen the ability to think clearly within a noisy world. They protect the mind from being carried away by every passing wave of fear, excitement, anger, or social pressure. And through those repeated choices, people begin reclaiming ownership of the one thing invisible influence constantly seeks to shape: the direction of their own thoughts. The hidden reality you must know is this. The greatest threats to your freedom rarely announce themselves. They don't arrive wearing a warning sign. They don't force their way into your life with obvious aggression. More often, they arrive disguised as comfort, through repetition that slowly becomes familiarity, through fear that convinces you not to question, through endless distractions that keep your mind too busy to reflect, through the deep human desire to belong, to be accepted, to avoid standing apart from the crowd. And that is what makes this kind of control so dangerous. It doesn't feel like control at all. It feels normal. It feels safe. It feels like the way things have always been. But the moment you begin to notice your automatic reactions instead